Hello and welcome to American Friction, the US politics podcast that's here to mend your broken heart. I'm Jacob Jarvis.
And I am Chris Jones.
And today we want to talk about broken things, specifically all the things Trump has broken in his second term as president.
From the CDC to the FBI to other acronyms you might not have heard of, there's a whole lot to go through, isn't there, Joel?
There really is. So to discuss this, we are joined by the author of We Hold These Truths and our podcast bestie, Casey Burgat. Casey, welcome back to American Friction.
Awesome. This sounds like it's going to be an uplifting one. Let's do it.
Yeah. We bring you in when we want it to be nice and bouncy and uplifting. I mean, first question, always a really positive start for it. First of all, so, it's been a year since Trump won, and it feels like a fucking long year. That feels like a long time.
And we're not even in America.
Has he been more or less damaging than you expected he might be?
Jeepers creepers. Well, number one, 9 years since he won the first time. How about that?
Yeah.
That's even crazier. And then a couple years before that, we're a decade plus into this experiment, but more or less damaging. I think the book is unwritten on that, right? When we look back at the first term, we obviously lived through that. You guys were probably hosting similar episodes then about what is on fire and how big is it going to get. But I bet my suspicion is you would take Trump 1 over Trump 2. Right? Just in terms of damage and aggressiveness and tactics.
Yeah, Trump 1 just felt almost like he was just trying to do bad shit but floundering around a lot. It felt like a spectacle that was almost amusing from this end to some extent. It was just like, this guy's awful, but he doesn't know what he's doing. Whereas Trump 2 has really felt like methodical.
Yeah, this one came with a plan, and it came with folks who were dedicated to that plan. They were not surprised by winning anymore, or if they were, they still had a plan to get into it. And there is, let's just say, fewer institutional guardrails and folks willing to, they were elected on this ticket rather than in spite of this ticket. And that means a lot for governance. But in terms of what's broken, he was not shy about what he wanted to do. He distanced himself from the Project 2025 map, but it was clear that it was obviously going to be led by folks who were really excited about the prospect of him serving again. But I think this is where it's really going to be hard, is that there's going to be decades before we know the final answer to these harms, that the boomerang effect of a lot of cuts and misinvestments and public distrust and things that we've taken for granted for so long will be felt for decades, and so will the consequences of it. So I can't answer your question, but it's not going to be sunny.
So the shutdown that we're still in, it really feels like never ending at this point. It doesn't at any point seem particularly closer to a conclusion. Does it feel almost to a point where Trump has effectively broken the government? It's just complete paralysis.
Yeah, but that to me, that is, yes, his hold on the Republican Party is almost complete. It's almost unilateral, but I blame Congress. I blame members of Congress before I blame him. We knew that was what he wants. We knew that is his incentive structure. It is up to everyone else to not just blindly jump with him. Can I get disappointed over and over and over again with that? Yes, but that doesn't mean my blame is misplaced. So, this is the fundamental responsibility that Congress has, right? Before anything else, before they decide any policies, they got to fund the government. And they've fallen down on this to a record-setting level, broke only or preceded by the longest one before that, unironically, in a Trump administration too. And this is what happens when you have people so mad at government and using it as such a big punching bag that the failure is kind of the point. Right? It's like what they want in the end. They get it to be smaller. They get it to be spending less money. They get it to be spending less money on people and populaces that they don't care about as much. And so that creates a really perverse incentive structure for doing what the Constitution expected, the bare minimum expected out of these members. So is it broken? Absolutely. But man, I don't only blame Trump for that.
Do they feel like there's much of a way back for Congress? Because as much as the people at some point will turn over, they seem to be giving away powers in such a way that we see this all the time. When powers are given away to the presidency doesn't like to give them back. And do you think people are realizing enough the level of permanence there is? Because to me, it feels like he's almost broken the people. They are spineless, and they just think, I've got no other option but to do what Trump wants because I want to keep my job and I want whatever I consider to be power now even if that means being powerless under Trump. I want the paycheck. But is there a route back long term, or is this, really, it's going to be a major project to build back a makeup of a Congress that makes sense?
Both, right? Like, if there's no quick answer, and this is what I fear for people, especially as we're always heading into not only a midterm, but 2028 talk is going to start almost immediately.
Yeah.
And people are going to present on both sides of the aisle, but Democrats are going to fall victim to this too, and I wish they wouldn't. They're going to present a rainbows and butterflies, like, just send us back, send me back with my plan, and we will fix this. So fast your head will spin type rhetoric. And that's a lie. And they know that's a lie. This is going to be it took a generation. Trump is a consequence, not a cause. It took a generation plus to get to this end degree of it. And it's going to take equally as long. In fact, failing democracies have proven over and over, the failure happens much, much faster than the buildup does. And the distrust in government at our core identity level creates an instance where, man, it's going to be a generation-defining task just to rebuild what it means to trust in government or use government as a force for good. We're in a really tight spot with what people believe and expect out of their system if they participate at all, which has always been a problem in American politics, to get enough people to pay attention at the same time to participate. But now, even if they are, it's usually out of fear or it's out of anger. And those are really unsustainable motives for participating in a democracy such as ours.
Just bringing it up to the present moment, obviously a massive thing that's been talked about is Zoran Mamdani. And I think a lot of people feel very hopeful at his win. And you said about the rebuild of Congress there, and obviously the midterms are coming up. Is there a bit of a concern that people try too hard to be cheap imitations of Mamdani? And obviously Mamdani, he's not proven yet. We don't know how he's going to be as a mayor, but he seems very authentic, and he seems like he's got actual plans of things he wants to do. Is the concern going to be, though, that people just go, well, institutionalized Democratic staffers go, oh, he was just really good at Instagram. And if you just smile and laugh a bit and you go to a couple of local stores and you look cool and interesting, that'll work for you. And then it's just gutless behind that. So is there almost a worry that one would hope Mamdani will set a positive example in some ways, but if you just try and be a sort of knockoff Poundland Mamdani, then that actually could be worse?
100%. And it's not just Mamdani's the most recent example of this, right? For a long time, Democrats really struggled to move on from Obama. And we had really cheap imitations of him, the hope and change movement, all that stuff. Like Hakeem Jeffries is still a pretty bad imitation of that. He tries so hard to be that. And then we see politicians kind of follow in that mold. And this is a copycat league. This is a copycat business. And so, yes, Democrats will struggle with that. And they would be wise to remember, because we always do whatever worked last, you just triple down on, quadruple down on, spend your billions of dollars doing. But it is not a one size fits all. And in fact, that's just begging for that inauthenticity that people can spot from a mile away, right? Like it's cringeworthy rather than inspiring. So to me, it has to be candidate driven and message driven. And this has always been true. And what works in New York City shouldn't work in Florida, and it shouldn't work in California, and it shouldn't work in Colorado. And to pretend that you can do that across the board with just kind of this plug and play templated attitude or messaging or communication style, don't. That's stupid. It's a lack of resources and a lack of foresight, to say nothing of listening to what people actually want and providing policies for them. I do think Republicans are very vulnerable to this now too. You're going to see a huge race to the imitation of what Trump is and how he does it. And no one's going to be able to do it like him. And so you'll see the Republican Party, especially with almost the entire Senate wants to run, obviously a ton of governors, a lot of cabinet secretaries. Like there's going to be a race to pick up the mantle that J.D. Vance probably has the lead on right now. But it's going to be the worst cheap imitations of what Trump does. And he is a genius on this. Make no mistake about it. He's a genius. And it won't be able to be replicated. And they're going to really struggle to pick up that mantle, chasing that imitation what it is, because they're trying to impress an audience of one right now, and that's him still.
Just before we move on to bodies like the FBI and SCOTUS, I just want to ask about the Democratic Party and the influence that the Trump administration has had on the direction of the Democratic Party. We're talking here about things that this administration has broken. How much of a hand do you think that Trump and his team has had in the state that the Democratic Party finds itself in today?
I think that it's had a huge hand, and this is probably, again, one of the huge vulnerabilities of Democrats, is that no one really, especially in 2024, no one knew what Democrats across the board stood for, what their message was. All they knew is that they were anti-Trump. So his hand is big in that they created a huge coalesced party around opposition, but they weren't offering something prescriptive, right? They weren't offering a policy portfolio outside of what it just generally means to be a Democrat and trust in government, climate change, education, like these broad ticket things, where that's not what people were interested in. So this is where they tried to have found something else, either in a candidate or in a platform, ideally both, where what is something that unites Democrats that we can all get behind, where no matter where you're from, that you are excited about the message and the messenger. And right now they're finding pockets of that, whether it's James Tallarico down in Texas being that inspirational voice down there, or Mamdani up in New York. But again, they ain't talking the same way. And there's one way to win a localized race like a New York City mayor or a state Senate or a Senate race in Texas, which he's got an uphill battle there. It's a very, very different beast to be a national party with someone who has to represent all those interests at once.
Let's move to some of those bodies now that perhaps are broken. And one of the big ones is the Supreme Court, which, we've spoken to a lot of people on this podcast about the Supreme Court and the way that it's almost been bent to the will of Trump. What is your view on how Trump this term, what he's done to the Supreme Court over the past year or so? And also with the latest news, this story may have moved on by the time this comes out, but at the moment of recording, there's a lot of questioning going on in terms of the Supreme Court and Trump's tariffs and pushback as to whether the tariffs were made legally or not. So, does that give you hope that perhaps the Supreme Court isn't totally bent to Trump's will? Or am I just clutching at straws?
I don't know, somewhere in between, almost always. But so when the phrasing of the question gave me a little pause of like what Trump has done to the Supreme Court. And so my immediate question came to mind, all right, like what actual things has he done to it besides the powers afforded to him as president, which is nominating who he wants. Yeah. And this is where elections have consequences. They're not just picking judges at random saying, all right, here's a big pool of qualified people who went to law school, tried cases, clerked, whatever your criteria are. And then no matter their ideology, as much as we think they're an independent branch of government just there to call balls and strikes, that's never, ever, ever been true. Never. They are nominated by partisan politicians, not randomly, to decide political questions, right? The hardest that we have. And to expect a court that, just as luck would have it, fate would have it, or Mitch McConnell would have it with his tricky business, they've been able to stack the court in a way that is very conservative, and that will last for a generation. So has Trump done that to the court? I guess, but so would have other presidents, and so would have a liberal president if you just flip the dynamics of it. So now it's up to the courts to decide their cases, but if you're expecting them not to bring in their partisanship for which they were selected in the first place, then I got a bridge to sell you, man. That's just not how it works, nor has it ever.
Yeah. Sticking with law enforcement, the FBI, I guess law enforcement in general, we've seen there's been ramping up of masked cops with ICE pulling people off the street, which is a whole fucking shady business within itself. Kash Patel in charge of the FBI, which the FBI, we spoke last week, me and Jav, about the FBI agents that have been fired simply for being involved in an investigation into Trump before he was elected. So, I mean, the question is, what state is law enforcement in at the moment under Trump? We used to call it the Republican Party, the party of law and order. It's just not anymore, is it?
They would claim for sure it is, and in fact, they're not. They are carrying out the will of the way that it should have been, and it hasn't been by liberal presidents. But if you look at the morale at places like this, like the Department of Justice or the FBI, the long-standing bureaucrats who have just dedicated their lives to this particular vocation, it's bad, man. It's bad. They don't trust the incentive structure of the people at the top, that they don't have the best interests of the institutions or their independence at heart. And that just undercuts the entire purpose of their foundation, right? Like that is a tough way to run the legal and criminal arm of the government. But we saw this coming too, man. Like this is what happens with the nominations process, the confirming by the Senate Republicans. It is in a dangerous spot, and we're not even getting into their day-to-day activity where I struggle with it. And I try to be as nonpartisan, not bipartisan. I hope to call balls and strikes where they are, but nonpartisan about this of like, if the shoe were on the other foot. And where I struggle with this mostly is that for the first time in my life, I don't know that I can trust the information presented by these independent bodies. Yeah. I don't know if what they're presenting as just the picture of the status of current investigations or why they did what they did or the evidence that bear. I don't trust that I'm getting the full picture from the government doing that.
Just a quick touch back on the Supreme Court, Casey, and just something that I constantly ponder and don't really get is that they're serious people. You know, whether you agree with them on their politics or not, they are serious people. They have done serious jobs. They have got tons of experience. And Trump can't just fire them, right? He can't just get rid of them. So why do they even struggle to have any fucking backbone? Because I get it when it's just on a case of ideology and they lean towards the ideology. But there's been some things they've called which to me have just seemed just completely pathetic. Like the only way you would call it that way is purely because you want Trump to be happy. But I don't get why they actually give a fuck about that. And it just seems really strange to me to put so much work in, get to that position, somewhat deservedly, obviously somewhat not deservedly, but there's no consequences for them not having a backbone. So I just don't get that. And I don't know, maybe it's more of a psychology question, but I'd just be curious to know what you think on that one.
My answer to that question is often the most disappointing one because it's an Occam's razor answer, is that they mean it. Like, this is how they rule. So you say it's not a part of their ideology. Their only reason they could be doing this is just to curry favor with Trump, who has no authority over them anymore. I think there's a more simple answer, is that this is what they believe as justices. Whatever their experience is or whatever their ideology, this is how they would rule. And they've proven that, which again goes to that question of, right, how are these people picked and for what reason? These things come up, these questions of how would you rule if, or if you had a case that had these certain defendants or plaintiffs or evidence, what would be your ruling? And they go through an extensive review process to find people to rule in ways that they're not putting up people that would rule against them. How about that? And they're finding the people who are most likely to rule in their favor on every case, whether they come up or not, including, to your point, Jarv, about what cases will you want to hear as a potential Supreme Court justice. That's part of the information back and forth too. But to me, the surprise ruling, we shouldn't be surprised about how they rule once they get there. I mean, to me, that is just the play's already been written and now it's just going forward.
Well, let's get on to health in America, because
we fixed it. We're done.
It's a tough one. Yeah, health is fixed. Chris, I'm going to come to you in a moment, just on RFK Jr. But Casey, RFK Jr., discuss how have you felt watching that? Because to me, he seems like it's kind of gone under the radar to some point. Not under the radar. People are aware of it, but to me, he just seems like the most dangerous man in America almost right now.
Ooh. Man, that is a draft I don't want to have. But this is to going back to the first question. We're going to see the downstream effects of these decisions for decades and decades and decades, where there's so much going on with someone like in a surgeon general. That's a position you don't pay attention to unless he's literally getting caught in a huge scandal, right? Yeah. And that is even true now, despite him being one of the most high-profile political figures that we have, right? Like with someone his name and his craziness in terms of opinions, you would think that there'd be a front-page story on him every day. There isn't. There might be a story worthy of it, but we're not going to know that until later. And so there are more qualified people for the job. There are much more qualified people for the job that have the long-term health interests of Americans at heart, that are willing to not only come up in the science that this position is just assumed to have and respect, but also be defenders of it too. And this is the counterculture. When you give them power, they're going to turn in those conspiracy theorists. Or conspiracy theories are incredibly powerful because they have a modicum of like, I can kind of see that. But then you don't make national policy based on that, right? And when you institutionalize that and you give people the freedom and now someone they can point to and say, see, I wasn't crazy all along, you're just going to have such bad predictable outcomes. And the problem is with something like medical care, yes, there's a huge immediate need right now when people are sick and they need responses now. But a lot of what they do is proactive and research that will have no immediate benefit. And that's how we get these big breakthroughs, at least historically speaking. When you're researching and developing things, you have no intention of solving right now. And we have absolutely not only cut that funding, but made it an enemy. So if you talk about rebuilding that stuff where trials take decades and decades, because you'll kill people.
Yeah.
When you're not doing it now, the effects of that won't be felt for a long time, to say nothing of just the outright distrust in science and medicine, something that has always been imperfect, but it's always been better than what it is now.
Chris, a lot of the governance of the United States, unfortunately, seems to be based around placating people on Twitter and random internet forums. And they're probably quite happy about RFK Jr. But on the whole, it doesn't seem like Americans are really behind this, are they?
No, not really. And if you look at the polling, that's the story that you are told. So KFF, which is the independent source for health policy research, polling and news, they did some polling. Dr. Celine Gounder, who we've had on this podcast, writes for them regularly. And she's someone I trust and believe. So I have no reason to not trust what these guys are putting out. So they did some research into the job performance of RFK Jr. As health secretary, which, by the way, to have this kind of polling for someone who holds the position of health secretary is not normal. Most people probably couldn't tell you.
Name another one.
Exactly. People couldn't tell you who Biden's health secretary was. I'm not even sure I could, to be honest. And I Googled it earlier. You just don't know about these people. But we know about RFK Jr. He is central to this Trump administration. But when it comes to this polling, 59% of people, Americans, disapprove of the job he is doing. And interestingly, you can imagine the sway between Democrats and Republicans, but when it comes to independents, 64% disapprove, which is a massive amount of people when you consider people who are, on the fence about who they're going to vote for in the midterms or the next election. But then also they did some polling on vaccine policy, and it's the same story. 62% in total disapprove, and independents take up the largest amount of groups that are involved in this polling. 67% of people polled by KFF do not believe in RFK Jr.'s vaccine policy. So, a lot of people not liking him and his policies.
Yeah, well, he has got the world record for the heaviest bench press whilst wearing jeans.
Yeah.
So you got to give him that. That's why he's such a picture of health. Foreign aid, Chris, just wanted to ask you quickly on that as well. We've spoken about this at length before. What are the impacts that are still going on from US aid being cut off?
People are dying. To put it simply, I found there's a website that anyone can go on, obviously, because it's a website and the internet's free. I don't know why I said that, but I've said it now.
Good info.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So
the internet's really good, guys.
www.internet.com. It's called Better World Campaign. And they list a whole load of impacts that cuts to foreign aid from this administration is causing. I'll read a few of them. So these are all from that website. It says, the World Food Programme has been forced to shut down its Southern Africa office due to aid cuts. In Kenya specifically, in refugee camps, that's led to an increase in violence. In Sudan, a country torn apart by war right now, we know all about that. The WHO estimates 5 million Sudanese people lost access to life-saving care due to the aid cuts in food and medical support. In Myanmar, the delivery of malaria tests and drugs have stopped pretty much completely, where cases increased tenfold over 4 years. In Afghanistan, the UN's Women's Health Agency warned that the absence of US support in the country will likely result in an additional 1,200 maternal deaths and 109,000 unintended pregnancies between 2025 and 2028. This is just, a small amount of the list that is just on our website, and there's a whole load of other issues there being caused by US aid being cut right around the world. But just to bring it back home, but staying with health, Casey, obviously the CDC has undergone massive changes and massive pressure because of RFK Jr.'s, leadership, if you want to call it that. What's the biggest danger, do you think, to health that the US faces under RFK Jr.? Obviously, we have a lot of talk about vaccines, but also, this ideology that seems to be coming from RFK Jr. Now we don't have those people at the helm of the CDC who are going to push back. It feels like that ideology is just going to bleed in and become even more dangerous, but cemented within the likes of the CDC.
Yeah, that was going to be my answer, is just the cementation.
See, I'm not always clutching at straws.
Yeah, exactly. You're learning.
Casey.
You're slowly evolving here. The cementation, or just you keep calling them RFK policies, but in reality, they're the United States government policies. Right. And so that's not only important for what it means within this country, but how the world looks at us, how it relies on us. Someone who's been a country who's been a leader on the research and development on this front in a lot of ways for a long time. It ain't that way anymore. I would be very skeptical of that internationally, which, as you mentioned, has a huge amount of very real human and economic consequences. But cementation of just the full-on distrust of the people we have for so long rightly trusted to do the job. And so that doesn't mean they were always right. That doesn't mean they always were ahead of the curve, or they didn't have flaws in what our system. This is a constantly evolving business and industry, which is what science is. We just have overshot the moon in what we expect out of not only our government, but how we think the curve of innovation has always happened. It's not just this beautiful straight line where no one can get sick or no one can die anymore. Yeah. But it's just this constant commitment to it is something that we took for granted for a long time, obviously, because when you're not committed to it, not only do you open the doors for people to be unhealthy and to die and to be worse off in their lives, but you take away that incentive or that commitment to commit yourself to it. As a scientist, as a doctor who wants to do it, now you can we have equated all opinions, from the crazy on the Reddits to the Twitter to the moms who are fearful, rightly so, of certain things like certain food dyes that we haven't really taken a leadership stance on. Yeah. They're all equated now with the most experienced doctors and the most dedicated servants out there, and they don't deserve to be equated that way. That doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to them, but they're not all equal, and we shouldn't treat them as such.
Do you think the United States can regain its reputation on the world stage eventually?
A long-standing reputation? I think it'll be person-dependent.
I guess it's a hard question saying what the US reputation is on the world stage.
Yeah, and so even when we go back to Biden, who was like this promise to return to normalcy, at least for our allies, they liked that because they knew who he was and a known commodity. Yeah. At the same time, we saw a huge lack of reinvestment or recommitments to a lot of those international world orders and agreements because they knew he wasn't going to be around forever. And so would you invest just for that 2-year cycle? If you're owning a business in Russia or China, bad examples, I guess, but India, if you own a business and you are not, you don't want to invest when Trump's president, are you confident that someone else like him won't come along in 4, 8, 12 years to get this payoff back? Yeah. I wouldn't. And so there could be personal recommitments to the reputation, and there'd be like, okay, I'm at least glad this guy's here, but I think that they don't trust our whiplash not to come back again when someone to to come back into power that upends a lot of those standing agreements and commitments.
Let's look at the GOP very briefly. And one thing I noticed, me and Chris spoke about this last week, that Ted Cruz is now calling Marjorie Taylor Greene a liberal. Love to see it, but the party just feels so weirdly like it's in lockstep behind Trump, but then so splintered at the same time. It's really odd to see. Here in Britain, we've seen the Tories, who are probably a closest political equivalent to the Republican Party, one of the most successful political parties in the world when it comes to, I would argue, not when it comes to doing good shit, but when it comes to just keeping a vice grip on power, very successful at it. And they now have almost become, they feel like an irrelevancy. They're like a joke. And what has happened is they've just crumbled, and Reform, who are more right-wing, have risen, taken on that mantle. And if you look at polling, the polling's very splintered, but are leading the way in polls, not with an outright majority, but they're ahead. In a post-Trump world, do you think that the GOP could potentially just die? Because you look at it and you think, well, without Trump, and you didn't fight Trump, and Trump isn't there anymore, what's the point? And is there the space? Because we've seen how much he's encouraged people like the Proud Boys. We've seen this push to welcome the right and encourage the right. Is there a chance that, the Republican Party could die, which people might welcome, but then be replaced or outshot by a third party that's actually even more extreme than them?
Not a third party. We're just not, our systems are not built for that. That is a way to get zero power at all.
Yeah.
But so to answer the question, I don't think they will die, but they're going to have a huge reckoning about what will that party look like that's powerful enough to win enough elections federally, right? Yeah. To have enough seats. So they're going to have, there's splinters in every party, as we're seeing right now, right? There's splinters on the left, there's splinters on the right. They call themselves even different things, but they all unite under their broad party label when it comes election time. And that's because we have a two-party system that only incentivizes that. And there will be, but that having those same monikers of Democrats and Republicans masks a lot of the evolution that we've already seen the parties take on, right? So like the Trump 2025 party, what it means to be a Republican now, is almost antithetical to what it was in 2012 for Mitt Romney to run as president. Mitt Romney got kicked out of this party, literally kicked out of this, despite being its literal standard bearer 1 decade before. That's bananas in terms of historical evolution of what a party means. So it will evolve. We don't know what it looks like, but we were getting increased evidence with last Tuesday's election results as the most recent examples that they're going to really struggle without Trump being the unifying factor on the top of the ticket. This is not a policy-driven party. It is an ideological-driven party, and that ideology is tied to one man in a way that we haven't seen in a long, long time, if ever, in this country. So what that looks like later on, which is how you get Marjorie Taylor Greene being called a liberal by another very conservative senator from her own party, it just is processing that evolution, knowing that the end is come for this version of it because its standard bearer is going to have to give way.
I've asked you similar questions to this before, Casey, but I always think it's just important to remind people on. But some naive political spectators, and I would argue some people who are involved in politics, just seem to have this mindset that things will snap back. Like everything snaps back. Like there's a center, there's a normality, and at the end of the day, that's what everyone kind of wants, and it will snap back. Has that ever been the case in the past when presidents have pushed even a percentage of the way that Trump has?
No. Next question.
Yeah.
No, I mean, no. And this is why it's really hard because, again, it's like a marriage, right? You can go 15 years with just the absolute happiest marriage, the most foundationally built, trusted relationship, and then all of a sudden you get cheated on once. What happens to those 15 years, right? Yeah. They're all up into the air. And then even if you decide to move on, It's always going to be right there. You just can't move on despite a commitment to rebuilding that. You can go to as much therapy as you want and you say, I am committed to this, but every time that phone's flipped upside down, every time that call comes in at a time that it's not, even if nothing bad has happened, it's just constantly in your brain. Am I telling on myself of what's happened to me, by the way, in my past?
It was sounding very oddly specific, Casey. Oh my God.
It actually hasn't, but now I'm waiting for it.
Yeah.
But, no, this is why the rebuild is it's just such taken for granted. And I think we're finally moving on from the Democratic Party just saying a return to normalcy. Once we get past this, we'll be fine. This is, they keep saying the new normal. No, it's just normal, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is it. This is all my students have ever known. This is all they see as what a president does and how they can be and how they can behave. And so this is what they expect going forward. And it's going to take a full-on recommitment and an agreed upon what are our foundations, our non-compromisables right now. And right now, there's not a ton of overlap between those circles, between the two parties.
Chris always gets a little bit jealous after we've done a podcast with you, Casey. He thinks I'm sort of having...
You just both got such great hair.
Shifting away. But don't worry, Chris. It's our pod, mate.
Yeah, he already cheats on me. Good. This is where it came.
Don't worry, you're okay.
I'm not insecure. You're insecure.
Exactly.
Anyway, this has been great, but it's been quite sad. And also, as we approach another year of Trump, we should probably.
It's only been It's not even been a year, man. He got elected a year ago. He hasn't been in for a year.
It's crazy.
I got a spin zone for you. Do you want a spin zone? Like a good news, positive spin on this?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, go on.
I don't have. No, I'm just kidding. I do, actually. Again, we are about ready to head into the midterms. And if Marjorie Taylor Greene's example is proving of anything, politicians will go where the votes are. And that is the most trusted thing that we can have. When it is not in their best interest electorally anymore, they have two options. They can retire or they can change their stance, which is why we have people like Lindsey Graham, who you don't know what they believe anymore because they change what they believe. But that's how it's supposed to work. That they are literally supposed to represent enough votes to put him in office. They're not just winning outright. So her chasing votes, politicians will chase votes, and you should take comfort in that. You should take comfort in the fact that they have to respond to enough of us. And if they change their mind, good. That's what's supposed to happen. We should need people and politicians to update their beliefs and not just be so line drawn in the sand. So my spin zone is not Marjorie Taylor Greene all of a sudden becoming the new AOC, but the fact that we are going to expose a lot of these politicians when they don't have Trump to rely on anymore, when they don't have the political cover that he gives them on a day-to-day basis, they're going to have to stand on their own 2 feet. And a lot of them are about ready to get exposed as being about an inch deep and nothing behind it. And that is going to be very, very cathartic. It's going to be very messy and very loud, but it's going to be very cathartic because someone's going to have to win those elections.
You heard it here first. Marjorie Taylor Greene, new member of the squad.
New member of the squad. Can you imagine? Oh my God. A podcast where we actually talk positively about, although we did do that last week.
It's going to happen.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Anyway, that was the positive note I was looking for. Casey, it's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I always appreciate.
And thank you to all of you for listening at home. If you enjoy these conversations that we have with people such as Casey, remember you can back us on Patreon to help us keep having more. That's patreon.com/American Friction.
You always do a backslash.
I don't know.
You always do the backslash.
Well, don't confuse them. Patreon.com/American Friction.
Again.
You can get episodes ad-free. You can get bonus content. Speak to us on there. It's all really, really great. And if you can't back us financially, we do get that. But please do go rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast. I'm Jacob Jarvis. Chris Jones, he's always there.
I'm here.
See you there.
See ya.